Good morning, everybody. I am really thrilled to be here with you and that so many people found their way to this virtual conference. I think everybody who is there wants to find out what the new Leipzig Charter wants to contribute to future-proof cities and regions. But there is more to this. You have not only logged on to this kickoff conference, but you have also logged on to the start of a whole series of web events under the umbrella name of Europe Cities Fit for Future, so with a question mark, or Europe Cities Fit for Future as a statement. So we will find out this. It's all a series of web events that accompany the renewal of the new Leipzig Charter during the German EU Council Presidency. And I would really like to also briefly mention the hosts. So this is the German Association for Housing, Urban and Spatial Development, and the Federal Ministry for the Interior, Building and Community. I'm Dorothea Palenberg. I will be your moderator, but instead of talking about me, I would really like to present you as a group to you. I'm sure that it's difficult to see, but I have here a really huge registration list. And I'm really happy that so many experts and stakeholders found their way to register to this interesting conference. We have a registration, we have participants from Finland down to Sicily, from Spain to Germany, of course. Surprisingly, a lot of people from Leipzig. We have a lot of different sectors, planners, but also different levels. We have, of course, a lot of mayors. We have the regional level. We have the ministerial level. We have people from the EU. So please take a second and imagine that we could also be together when there would not be a pandemic, that we could sit together in a big conference room. By now you would have spotted one of your best friends, save a seat for him, sit together and have a chat about great colleagueship. So try to imagine this and let's enter this conference with this spirit. Also here, just a few introductory words before I can hand over to the welcoming statements. Because also here I am not alone. I am here with a very, very skilled team from the German Association for Housing. First of all, it is Hauke Meyer and Heike Magis. Please, I would just like to turn around and maybe you just come over for a second so that we can see you. So look how mysteriously they appear here. Because I feel, and then we of course also have Jonas Scholze, who is virtually with us. I feel very privileged to be able to moderate, but because they did all the work, they were in touch with all the speakers, they prepared the design of the conference, and so I am really just the person moderating here. We have a very packed agenda, and for this I would already now like to introduce the Slido feature. I'm 100% sure that by now at least 90% of the participants are familiar with this. But I would like to briefly explain that this is a nice feature where you can ask questions. There's the opportunity of a website that can be where you can log on to slido.com. You can also download the app on your smartphone, on your cell phone, or on your mobile, wherever you are. This device is called differently everywhere. And you can ask questions. So the nice thing about Slido is that you can not only ask your own questions, either under your name or anonymously, but you can also like the question of others. And the good thing is that from time to time, we will have the chance to have a look at this, and Heike and Hauke, this great team, I think it's a great name. Heike and Hauke will help us a lot with this. My question is to Jonas Scholze. Would you like to present one more time the Slido slide, or has this been already? Well, very nice. Thank you very much. So for those who did not see it in the preparatory phase of this conference, the number is 26353, and please ask and rate your questions. We have a very packed agenda. I already said that, and this is probably also the reason that we will not be able to answer all the questions immediately with the speakers. We promise that we do our very best to have a look at the most important and most urgent and most common questions and try to respond to them as a team. So latest in a few weeks, you will receive a wrap-up summary with these questions answered. So again, packed agenda, and I'm talking a lot, so let's get down to business and let me be quiet. We have two great opening statements. The first will be of the president of the German Association for Housing, Urban and Spatial Development, Michael Groschek. I'm thrilled that he took the time to address us. He has quite a very, very high-ranking career already. He, for example, was the former Minister for Construction, Housing, Urban Development in the German federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia. But what I like about him giving one of the two opening statements is the fact that he's a multi-sectorial person. He's an economist, a communicator. He's highly politically engaged, and he always stood up and was engaged for autonomous, socially balanced, and digitally fit cities and municipalities. Mr. Groschek, I'm thrilled that you are here, and I'll be quiet now. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the opening session of our web series, Europe Cities Fit for Future. Today's event was originally planned in a completely different setting, with a big conference here in Berlin. This was before we all could even imagine how strongly COVID-19 would affect and restrict our usual habits, our daily work and lives in 2020. Considering this, I want to thank everyone who made this web conference series possible, for their dedication and their flexibility during the many adaptations that had to be made. My thanks include especially the German Federal Ministry of the Interior for Building and Community for their strong support to organize this event. Here I also to thank our cooperation partners, Urbeck, Metrex, Eurotowns, and thank them for their valuable inputs. Further, I am very thankful for all our speakers and moderators that were open to contribute to our web sessions. Beyond that, I am very glad and honored by the great interest of our web series by nearly 500 people from all over Europe watching us on YouTube right now. Hello. As much as are all looking forward to meet face to face again, the possibilities of online formats opened new doors for international dialogue that were hard to imagine a year ago. Ladies and gentlemen, today and throughout the upcoming sessions, we will have a look at what our neighborhood cities and regions need to be fit for their future challenges. At the heart of this will be the framework for the new Leipzig Charter that sets out main guidelines and principles for sustainable and resilient urban development. On behalf of the German government, our association is directly involved in the organization of the extensive European dialogue and drafting process of the new Leipzig Charter. We do this in a consortium with European Urban Knowledge Network and the Brandenburg University of Technology, Cottbus-Senftenberg, that will also contribute to some of our web sessions. As all our work and life, also the development process of the Charter was hit out of the blue by the drastic challenges and restrictions coming along with COVID-19. Consequently, there was a need to rediscuss and rethink the Charter's principles, and new questions arose. Does the Leipzig Charter prepare our city adequately for external crisis? Do we need a just density and focus on inner city development? One thing, however, is clear. Social distancing does surely not serve as a new guiding principle in urban development. Further, digital instruments have helped us a lot during the lockdown, and virtual realities will never replace our valuable interactions in public spaces and our neighborhoods that are central arenas for personal encounters and identification. Clearly, Corona taught us crucial and painful lessons and stressed importance of resilience. The answer lies in an integrated and participative urban development for the common good. Only an urban development policy like this has the ability to balance, connect, and harmonize ecological, social, and economic goals, something that is needed to face any crisis and thus to be fit for the future. This includes, for instance, to push the economic recovery after Corona without endangering our important sustainability goals. This also includes to ensure that our Corona heroes in hospitals or supermarkets will not be pushed out to live behind the gates of our newly designed, resilient, and gentrified cities. In this sense, resilience of cities is closely interlinked with the balance of the so-called triangle sustainability. Cities are more robust to crisis if they are combining a functioning economy with climate-friendly as well as socially fair policies. Ladies and gentlemen, the current draft version of the new Leipzig Charter strongly promotes these principles of integrated, participative, and place-based urban development, as did the Charter from 27. But above that, a core element of the new Leipzig Charter is a focus on empowerment at the local level. This addresses the ability and the means of cities to provide services, infrastructures, land, the digital transition, and the sustainable space and housing policy for the common good. The new Leipzig Charter is a guide for the organization of urban realities in the whole of Europe, rather than a collection of abstract principles. It clearly states that we need the help of everybody and the cooperation of all levels to get our cities fit for future. Ladies and gentlemen, to make these scenarios and new Leipzig Charter a reality, all actors need to join forces. Empowerment of cities needs dialogue and cooperation between all levels and background to harmonize policy instruments. Herein lies change to unleash the transformative power of our city. This has always been a key motivation for our work at the German Association for Housing, Urban and Spatial Development. Therefore, it is with great pleasure that I open this web series today. Thank you very much for that attention.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Groschek. Knowing you a little bit, we know that these are words that really come from your heart and from your engagement. So thanks a lot for being with us today. The next welcome. Well, the stream is back on, so I hope we didn't lose too many participants, but maybe some of you had the chance to grab a coffee. We have decided that we try to show the the welcoming address of Volkmar Vogel after the stretching legs phase. So Dr. Maak, if you would be ready and flexible enough, I would just like to welcome you here. I just give you the title of the keynote, Our City's Future, What's Ahead? And the fun to announce Dr. Maak is that it's really a great keynote speech that helps us to freshen up our minds a little bit by someone who was not deeply involved in the machinery of the renewal of the Leipzig Charter, but who is very skillfully busy and engaged to comment, to assess, and to observe the whole European urban development scene. Mr. Maak is since 2001 working for the German Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung, a big newspaper in Germany, and from time to time also lecturing in Frankfurt and in Harvard. So very impressive. He received many prizes, but what I found more important are the very interesting titles of his books. One book says, Living Complex from Zombie City to New Communal. I like this title a lot. I'm sorry that I didn't get the book so far. I will buy it. And the most recent work is Technophoria. So your critical mind and thrust is highly appreciated, and we really look forward to shake us up a little bit. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dorothea. That was a very kind introduction. I'm very happy to be with you this morning at this very important conference. I think that the last months have shown us the urgency of really profoundly rethinking the way we build or conceive our cities, our future life in these cities. And for my job, as you said, as a newspaper writer, book writer, and a teacher, I have talked to many people the last months about their experiences with the corona crisis. And what struck me was that their reaction to this crisis depended largely on the way how they lived, how they could basically use either a garden or a nice roof terrace, or if they were stuck in a high rise, these famous German Plattenbauten. And so it depended largely on the question, did I have a garden where I could basically be with my family or with my friends or with my beloved ones? Or was I basically locked down, locked away in a retiree home or in a high rise without a balcony? And so while some of the people I talked to perceived the crisis almost paradoxically as a kind of holiday that brought them together with their kids, together with neighbors and friends, others described it as a deeply traumatic experience. And I think this depended largely on the question of how they dwelled, in what kind of buildings they were living in, what kind of social spaces they could use in the cities and villages they lived in. So I think the Leipzig Charter, of course, was written before we knew about the pandemic, but in an almost premonitory way, it basically prefigurated some of the urgent questions that we're dealing with now. So I would love to use my time here to discuss some of the aspects that are also addressed in the new Charta and also related to the current situation, because what we can say now is that Corona has aggravated and accelerated some ongoing processes in the development of our cities. And it became clearer than ever that the development of our cities undergoes maybe the most drastic change since the beginning of industrialization. And of course, we see the effects of climate change, the effects of new migrational flows, the effects of an unequal distribution of wealth, and the effects of digitalization in a good, but also sometimes in a problematic way in our cities. So, and of course, if many things change, this is always an exciting time. And I think it's important, while we tend to talk about the future of the city always in terms of addressing and fighting and wrestling with problems, I think we should have it clearly in our minds that this is a great chance now to completely rethink the way we live and dwell in cities. So, but let's nevertheless start with some problems. There was just yesterday there was a statistics coming out organized by the German Trade Association that warns that after the lockdown, at least 50,000 shops in Germany alone are at risk of closing. At the same time, we learned that online retail recorded a sales increase of up to 30% compared to last year. And it's pretty clear that this is a change which does not only have to do with Corona, but that will last. So basically, the idea of shopping will really profoundly change the cities. And at the same time, we see when we discuss what are we doing in a city, why are we going to a city? Of course, shopping was an important aspect for many people. Another, even more important aspect, of course, of going to a city, of living in a city, is work. What we learned in the last months is that the pandemic turned into maybe the largest experiment to study the effects of home office. And whether you like or regret it, and I think that's important to discuss that, it seems to be a very tempting alternative for big companies to just leave their workers at their homes. And also that is supported by some research of Stanford University, who claims that the productivity of home workers increases largely, that employees are more or less even more satisfied than when they go to offices. And another study claims that if you convert, for example, all the jobs you can do from home to home office, if you eliminate the costs of office buildings, you could save, I have the numbers here, up to $700 billion in the United States alone. And that the effects of the environment for the environment would also be great, because if you would basically eliminate traffic from homes to office towers in the city, you would basically have the equivalent of the disappearance of all the cars in the state of New York. So staying at home, working from home, would be a great benefit for the environment. It would be economically very tempting. And so many companies think it makes no longer sense to basically locate work in the heart of the cities. And of course, that is not only a promise, but also maybe a threat. And we should discuss that. But for now, I think we have to constate that the things that shaped historically the form of the city and the organization of cities are basically changing or vanishing. And I think the important question also for the discussions today is, what is a city when the occupations that shaped it since its beginnings vanish or dematerialize? So what is a city when shopping and office labor and factories disappear, when we order food online, when we work from home, and when we watch Netflix instead of going to the cinema, though we claim to like that? And what to think further on? What is a public square, a city in this world, and what happens in these cities? I think these are the questions that we have to raise on a very fundamental level. So sometimes people think that the future of the city is to be found in smart city plans. And I think it's important to ask how smart cities. And I think that smart city planners, mostly from private organizations, can very convincingly talk about the future of cities, of how self-driving electric cars make your commute safer and more sustainable, and how facades can become greener, and how you maybe can be transported in an automated car from your home to work. But they never answer the question, why should you go to the city at all if you don't work there anymore, if you don't shop there anymore, and if even you don't go there for leisure, for the cinema? So will cities only be enlarged areas full of restaurants for tourists, or can we think of a more compelling idea of what the city could be when all these fundamental changes that have been fueled by digitalization will happen? So as everybody will talk a lot about green facades, automated cars, smart tools, I would invite you to do less of a technical discussion of the city and raise a more profound, an axiomatic question, which is, how do we want to live in a future that offers, thanks to digitalization, formerly unimaginable opportunities? Of course, as I said, cities were built around the idea of work. The city was founded because there was a marketplace and people came to that marketplace. The metropolis, as we know it, is basically the result of an unprecedented concentration of workforce, labor, and production means in factories. And the post-war city after 1945 was clearly a result of a society that organized itself around office towers and living in suburbs and commutes in cars. So the big question is, how can a society who makes a lot of gains and a lot of deals online, who works online, who consumes and produces online, materialize in the form of a city? For sure, work will not disappear, but work will change its character. And I think this is already a chance for the cities to come. Because I am convinced that if we look at the development in America, but also other states, many shopping malls will disappear, office towers will disappear, and public parking lots might be disappearing if we organize traffic more intelligently. So that means that in the cities that suffer so much from high prices, from exploding rents, in these inner cities, we will find all of a sudden millions of square meters of empty, formerly expensive space, parking lots, streets where only cars were going up and down, office towers where people used to work. And this could also, of course, be seen as a chance to bring affordable housing back to the cities and bring other forms of work back to the cities, and with them many small workshops, local food production, small shops, so an ecosystem that has been there for decades and centuries, but had been pushed to the boundaries and destroyed by an aggravated market economy. So
can I just ask one little question? You have I'm a very visual person, and you have painted this picture, so I see that this city is emptied of a lot, and now you have already started to fill it. Could you, with your words, help me to paint this picture with what this is filled, so we have affordable housing, and just I really want to visualize it a little bit.
Of course, I mean, we already, I mean, we could basically in 2 months' time show images of that. In Paris, there is an association that buys up empty retail space and converts that into libraries, into workshops, into office spaces for little businesses and or call it startups. In Berlin, there is an artist team of Schinkel Pavilion that demonstrated how an empty shopping mall, the Quartier 206 in the heart of Berlin, could be converted into a fantastic theater where performers go up and down the escalators. And I think we saw many examples in cities like Detroit that were hit hard by the structural change, where basically streets and parking lots have been converted into farms where children grow vegetables and they cook together and they play with animals and show that urban farming can be productive and fun and can bring families and neighbors together. So it's a form of turning cities more resilient, but also turning them into a more fun idea of what living together in a city could mean. And I think that basically also these examples show that the social resilience of old cities can re-emerge in the cities once the economic pressure has been gone. And I think at the same time we see very hopeful examples for a reframing of formerly efficiency-driven cities, where the care of children was outsourced to kindergartens and the one of the elderly to retiree homes. And I see that in these new cities where other forms of dwelling together are tried out, you can also see new forms of living together with people who otherwise would have been going to a retiree home. And I think this brings me to a very important point, because many who listen here today, I think, are also thinking about what kind of typologies, what kind of new buildings do we need, or how can we transform empty space in these cities into new and valuable forms of housing. And I think it's important to remember that building policy is always a normative statement about the way we organize our societies, and a statement that encourages certain forms of living and discourages alternate models to live together. And I think a wonderful example is that many politicians take pride in saying, we have built thousands of apartments for young families. which sounds great, but then you have to see that in many areas of our cities, young families are just a maximum 20% of the population. So you could claim that nuclear families are there, of course, and need space, but we build for a society that often does not exist anymore in that form. And we should also think of other people and their needs. For example, if you take 80-year-old people who don't want to go to a retire home, they want to, like their great idols, the Rolling Stones, they want to stay as a group and they want to have fun together and live together. But it's very hard for them to find an apartment where they could live together and have care and maybe also see their children and grandchildren. So why don't we build houses that could also easily accommodate a circle of 80-year-olds, or a circle of single parents and friends who want to co-educate the children, who want to help themselves while somebody is working on the computer and the other might play with a child. That also might create a new form of co-education, of closeness to your beloved ones. So I think the big chance, of course, of a digitalized city is that the basically tragic everyday life that consists in dropping your kids at school, dashing to your office, spending 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 in your office, and then rushing home, cooking something and falling into bed, maybe watching a Netflix series, that can be overcome. And I think that this is a great chance that we have to discuss, and that's why I also think that we need not only the new Leipzig Charter, who does address many of these aspects in a very productive way, I think, and you discussed that later on today, but I also think that we need a building exhibition, IBA as we call that in Germany, that would basically display how you can build new houses, but also transform existing structures into new forms of dwelling that would have space for intentional communes, that would have space for workshops where you actually really can bring life and work together, and not in a form that basically happens on the expenses of life. Because I think this is a danger that we have to discuss. We always say it's so great to work from home, that sometimes people just work and work and work and never stop because there's no boundary between the private life and work anymore. And I think that there must be new solutions, and I think we have very interesting examples. For example, in Berlin, where the House of Statistics is turned into from an office building to a very complex amalgam of housing where you can actually dwell with your families, but also where you can work, where knowledge production takes place in little amphitheaters. So there's a whole new ecosystem of social life of the city emerging in these forms. And I think an IBA, a building exhibition, could basically organize money to create these images and to convince people that life could be possible differently in a city. And I think a big problem is that I think there are many brilliant young architects, young urban planners, but they're never given the chance to really display their utopias, to display their ideas for a future city. And I think this international building exhibition could give a new generation a chance to actually convince investors, convince politicians, convince other cities to really radically reframe the idea of living together. And I think this goes also for challenges we're facing currently, like the question of how to live together. And I want to clearly avoid the word integration, because integration is also forcing somebody into our narrative. But I think, how could we live together with all the new arrivals, the refugees that came? This is still a largely unsolved question. And I found very encouraging examples for that. For example, in the Italian towns of Riace and Camini, that show how dying villages have been saved and rebuilt by refugees, and also showed how the local knowledge and the expertise of those new arrivals, and how also, when we talk about cities, we always think about big cities, about metropolises, but I think it's also very important to see the huge potential of all these beautiful small towns we have in Europe, in many areas, that could, thanks to the possibilities of digital work, of working from home, could be reactivated and also help to lower the pressure on the real estate market in the big cities. So I think there are very hopeful examples, and I think it's also important to stress that to be able to fully embrace the chances of the digital age, politicians must take back power. And we saw that basically an unchanged market economy can't solve the problems alone. So I think, as in many cities, social cohesion is at stake. We must discuss about some premises of a truly new urbanism. And I think a city, as green as it might be and as resilient in a technical way it might be, cannot be fit for future if its terrain is the battleground of merely private interest and unproductive forms of speculation. And I think this is not only true for the physical, but also for the digital terrain. We saw one of the biggest problems in European cities was, of course, that public terrain, public land was sold at very low prices just to fill the financial gaps to private investors who started to speculate with that land. And I think the same is true for the digital terrain. And I think it's important when we talk about cities fit for future to also talk about data possession, because in the digital age, to my view, data is a collective treasure, a collective product of all the citizens of our cities. They produce it and they should own it. It belongs to them. But today, when we look what happens, data is exploited and owned by tech companies, or if we look further on at China, by authoritarian states. And I think we need a European way to deal with that. And there again, also, I have this fantastic example of the innovation designer, Francesca Bria, who worked in Barcelona and has shown how a public digital platform can activate and connect citizens and empower them to take part in direct democratic decision making. And she also proved that it's possible to force large tech companies to give back data to the people, which she did with Vodafone. So Vodafone finally agreed in giving the people the data that they produced and not selling it on its own behalf. So I think it's important to stress that a city that is fit for future in the proper sense must reclaim data sovereignty and must talk about the distribution of digitalization gains. That is a political request that I think no other city can do alone, but I think we need really to think about it.
Mr. Maak?
Yeah.
Mr. Maak, very briefly, I don't want to stop your flow of ideas because it's but I just want to inform you that we have a lot of reactions coming up. Many of them say that it's a brilliant talk. So I would be the last person to stop it now because you still have some time. But there are questions coming in, and I just want to inform you. They are asking about. I also saw Anna Geppert smile when there was this part about small and medium-sized cities. So we hear about this later. But Mr. Maak, are you interested to get some questions, or would you like to wrap up your flow of ideas right now?
I am. I just want to maybe say two more things, and then we can discuss that. That I think that basically, I think the biggest problem is that we have an angelic discourse about the future of the city, and always the recurring words are green, sustainable, secure. And I think the biggest danger is that tech companies will abuse this wording and basically try to influence mayors and politicians and people to basically buy their products. And basically, when we take again the example of the self-driving car, of course it saves maybe some energy and causes less traffic jam compared to a normal car, but I think it's an answer to the wrong question, because I think it would be much more efficient, greener, more inclusive, and more empowering to build cities in a way that you can walk wherever you want. And you don't need a car, whether it's electric or fuel powered, or hop on a free bus. But then, of course, you cannot sell millions of electric cars. So basically, some cities are pushed into buying whole fleets of automated cars just to make the economy work. And I think another important point is that CCTV cameras and tracking systems everywhere might give you a feeling of security in our cities, but as you see in the people of Hong Kong, you might also soon have too much of it. And I think also, and this is important to discuss, a city needs dark spots. A city needs the right to disappear And I think there are other technical solutions, like an alarm system on your mobile phone connected to public sirens, where you could basically alert your co-citizens, alert the police if you feel threatened. This is a much more effective way of feeling protected in the city than equipping everything with CCTV cameras. So I think we have to ask other questions than the questions that the smart city planners are currently proposing. And basically, I think it makes no sense to make cities a bit greener. We have to ask questions that go beyond the question of reducing emissions and traffic. And these questions are what I call the axiomatic, the fundamental questions of the new city. And I think these are the question of how do we want to live given the new possibilities of the digital age? How do we spend our days, and where and with whom? And where do we want our medicine, our food to be produced, and under which conditions? Where will people meet? What is a piazza, a square in times of digitalization? And I already think, and I might close with that, that already the use of public spaces change. Already today we witness that lobbies and museums and libraries are used as a new form of public living room by young people. And I think that city centers could not only be places of consumption, but also places of knowledge production, of education, and of ways to spend more time with friends and family. So I think, again, the good news in these troubled times is it's a great time to be a planner. It's a great time to be a politician, an architect, an urbanist, because you can rethink everything now from scratch. And I think that is a great gift. So basically, I wish you a fruitful and exciting day. Maybe we have time for some questions.
Thank you very much. Again, many feedback was about the brilliance of this talk. So thank you for that. And thank you also for the inspiration. We have some incoming questions. One is from Henk Baumann from Metrex, a very simple one. And it's a very open question, let me put it this way. So please answer compactly, because there are 3 more questions to come, and I don't want to bundle them. Do we still need cities? Because the speech is very brilliant, but people are still social beings. We will need to meet each other. How do we deal with the social issues that come up? And maybe I bundle it a little bit, because Satu from Tampere is asking around this whole part when you talked about home office. I quote, "Isn't it a bit unequal that some people will have the possibility for homework, but it's not a realistic option for many health and social care workers, teachers?" So I guess it's a little bit the communal services. How are they located, and how will work be organized there?
Okay.
Could you compactly elaborate on this, please?
Very short answer to these very important questions. I think that systemically, digitalization, with all its devastating effects on the office space and on shopping in large forms, shopping malls, is an enormous chance to rethink how we use these empty spaces. And I think that more space and more money for healthcare, for reproductive work, is an essential part of that. And we have seen in the last months how important healthcare and taking care of others is for a society not only in times of crisis. So I think if the economic pressure on the centers of city will be lowered, because kind of a form of hyper-capitalism basically kills the shopping mall, kills the office tower, that were effects of a form of capitalism, we come into a very interesting situation which we can use their ruins productively, the ruins of this form of capitalism, to basically have more space to spend with children and others. So I think homework is, yes, it's still a privilege for some people, but the digitalization gains, if we distribute them rightly, and this is a political decision that has to be taken, if we distribute the gains of digitalization rightly, we can pay people who take care of children, elderly, and of sick people, we can pay them much more money, and we should do that. And you see it already in Denmark, how this is made and how this could work. And I think yes, some might not be able to work from home, but I think the lowered pressure on the inner cities that is a consequence of a decay of the office tower and the office complex in the city is a chance to reframe our idea of us as social animals in cities. Okay, I get a sign. Was already
no, it's just we need three more very compact helps. I have tried to gather this a little bit. This is also why I'm looking around a little bit while you are talking. It's not a lack of interest or any other kind of distraction. It's just all the messages that are coming in. So there are three questions that ask a little. I would say that ask a little bit for help how to defend and how to defend this attitude and how to also get some good arguments. So three questions. What do you respond to those who say we need to put economic growth at the forefront of the recovery process? Second question, how do we get this message down to planners and local politicians? And how do we also convince the investors that they would like? You had this example of Vodafone, for example, that they join us in going into this direction. Please answer compactly because there's more discussion to come. I'm sorry to need otherwise that I don't want to cut you off because I could talk forever. But
first point is economic growth doesn't mean growth of international big companies, but economic growth can also come from the roots of a society. And I think we see it in newly densely populated areas, that there is an enormous form of economic growth that starts on a very local level. And thanks to digitalization and the capacity of being able to distribute the goods that you produce worldwide, you can basically build wooden ducks in your workshop and sell them all over the world. If people love them, you have a global market for a very local product. So I think that economic growth it has not been connected anymore to big companies and their overarching presence in our cities. So I think that we should not be afraid of basically encouraging local initiatives, startups, people who want to open a little shop, and to connect them. This can be organized by the state, by a community, a neighborhood, to connect these and create a very powerful kind of micro anti-Amazon, which has been done in Schweinfurt, where local shop owners gather together with cargo bike owners, and they created a wonderful economic system that is growing exponentially. So I think that this should not be our biggest concern. How can economic growth be organized? I think it's now important to not give out of our hands the capacity to decide how to basically distribute the gains that are produced by data collection. I think the biggest challenge is to get all these companies who are pushing into the cities, and I know it from many car makers, because people don't buy so many cars anymore. So car makers address cities, big cities like Dresden or Hamburg. So can we develop with you the transport concept with trains and bikes and some cars? And I think this is a danger, because then again, communities and the state gives out of hands the possibility to decide what to do and how to rebuild the city. So I think it's you should really think more bottom up than top down when it comes to economic growth, and also keep the political tools in hand.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maak. So I guess the virtual is this, but I found this a little bit. Thank you very much. It was very energizing and activating. So to all the participants, please stay with us. Don't rush away and start to change people's minds. Thank you for this energizing talk and also for your presence in responding to the questions. Well, I'm sure that Anna Geppert has no, probably not. How will the Leipzig Charter align with the other integrated strategies, such as other big political strategies? There are also macro region, sea basin strategies. So this is more into the political area of the structural funds. I don't know, Dr. Maak, do you have an idea how all these policies should constructively work together?
I think I have no answer, but I will basically support the question with another question from my side. I think that all these charters and concepts and strategies developed in countries of course, have to urgently be brought together on a European level. And I would even say not only on a European level, but I think we should try, if we are constantly talking about Europe as a third way, Europe proposing a third way in the future of cities, between America, where basically the dominance and technical sovereignty of large private companies is so big that you could basically talk about a privatization of the commons in America, and of a clearly authoritarian idea of how the future of cities should look like. For example, in China, we're constantly talking about a third European way, but I think it's extremely important to bring together all the strategies and proposals in one spot, and then also think about jumping over the Mediterranean Sea into the Northern African countries, which I think should be an integral part of our efforts, because everything we do here affects them. Everything they do will affect us. So I think it's urgently, if we talk about the third way, we should think about Europe and Africa together developing new narratives, new ideas for the city, future of the city. And I think that could be a really powerful third way if we geopolitically just not only think about bringing all these things together in Europe, but also thinking about what is the effect and what is the potential of working together with Northern African cities, for example. And I think we clearly need a strategy here. And so I think the question is totally right, yeah, because we have all these wonderful ideas in France, in Spain, in Italy, in Norway, in Germany, and I think it needs a mutual effort, more than has been done already, to basically turn that into a truly European or European and African narrative about how we want to develop in the future. But then it's also my question to you experts, how that could be put into place.
There's another aspect that was rated very highly in Slido, but also in the YouTube chat. It's about where I know Professor Geppert. I'm the last person to be able to hold your talk, but I remember one important thing that is also probably interesting to Dr. Maak. It's this notion about the relevance of small and medium-sized cities when this concentration is probably stretching out a little bit across the countryside. How can we imagine this? And Ms. Geppert, after we probably fixed the quality of the speech, we can pick up this later after the break. But please, the last 2 minutes before stretching legs, whatever that means, to Dr. Maak about the role that the smaller cities will play in the future.
Yeah, I think they can play a big role, because what we saw in the last decades was basically the eviction of all these well-functioning small towns and medium-sized towns, to the benefit of concentration of workforce and attractive labor in large cities. And I think that digitalization, again, is a chance to basically rethink that and make small cities, small towns much more attractive. And as said, it's not a solution for everybody, but for many people who might think, instead of paying laughably high rents in Munich, Schwabing, they could maybe move to a small town in Bavaria and work from home while their kids play in a little river, and have the benefits of countryside life, and still you're connected. So I think we're at the point where the tragic decision some people have to make between being a countryside person and being devoid of all the promises of the big city, of the metropolis, or being the glamorous person from the big city. This is clearly over, but this is not already in the minds of the people, that the small city is an enormous asset socially and also in terms of real estate. And I wonder why real estate developers have not been more aggressively diving into the possibility of rebuilding the village, the city, as a new form also for whole communities from larger metropolitan areas. So I think that this is a big task for the future, when we talk about cities, not to think into forms of a one-way street, that everybody would constantly move from the countryside into the city. This has been proven wrong, and also it has shown how devastating the ecological effects of that narrative are. And I think UNESCO is to be blamed, because they said in 20 years' time, 70% of the world's population will live in large city. I doubt that. I don't believe in that, and I think we can actively counteract that development.
Well, thank you very much. I would say these are your optimism and these visionary positive statements are really contagious, and we take these into the short break. This is usually the time in physical conference where I tell everybody where the toilets are. You know this much better than I do right now. And we are back in 10 minutes. In this meantime, we try to fix the sound problem with Anna Geppert. So far, I thank everybody for participating so actively, for helping us when there was a bumpy ride with the technicalities. And we'll see each other in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Maybe, Dorothea, okay, just a question.
Yes.
I think if there are questions, I could also basically, if you bundle them, I could also basically after the conference answer some of them via email, because I think it's always
that's very kind. That's what we said this in the beginning, that we try our best there, because look at this. I mean, this is just the questions that came in, and this was also I realized that I laughed sometimes when I tried to put 5 questions together.
No, and I actually think it's helpful also for the participants, that because we're doing this at high pace. This is like a car race, right? Car race of answers. So I think if somebody wants to stop and rethink and reflect and ask another question, I'm also happy to answer some of the questions if you bundle them.
Thank you very much.
In a conversation via email. So maybe you can announce that as a possibility.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. I really have to see the bathroom now.
Okay, that's the question. Do you still need me, or am I out of the arena?
I think that's okay, because Dr. Maak is asking whether he's still needed for the second part, but I guess it's fine. Well, so thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you. It was great how you maneuvered us through this with all the meanness, and I hope we'll talk soon again.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Hello?
Well, welcome back, everybody. We are happy that we can resume. And without further ado, we start with the welcoming speech of the Parliamentary State Secretary to the German Federal Minister for Interior, Building and Community, Volkmar, Vogel. So whoever will pull up the video, it will appear now. Otherwise, I need to use Jedi power.
Guten Tag, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren. Herzliche Grüße nach Leipzig. Auch wenn ich Sie heute nicht persönlich begrüßen kann, ist es mir eine sehr große Ehre, die heutige Konferenz eröffnen zu dürfen. Ich spreche sicherlich für uns alle, wenn ich behaupte, dass persönliche, zwischenmenschliche Begegnungen mit all ihren Facetten nicht durch die digitalen Formate ersetzt werden können. Gleichzeitig liegen aber in diesen neuen Formaten auch Chancen, um uns einfacher und effizienter zu vernetzen. Chancen, die es gleichsam gilt, für unsere Städte und Gemeinden einzusetzen, um sie fit für die Zukunft zu machen. Und genau deshalb bin ich zuversichtlich, dass wir mit den gewählten technischen Lösungen heute und an den kommenden Tagen dieser Konferenz einen regen Austausch haben. Zu Beginn möchte ich mich natürlich ganz herzlich beim Deutschen Verband für Wohnungswesen, Städtebau und Raumordnung für diese großartige Organisation dieser Webkonferenz bedanken. Ja, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, 2020 ist in vielerlei Hinsicht ein ganz besonderes Jahr. Im Februar wurde ich für die Stelle des Parlamentarischen Staatssekretärs berufen und habe damit die Nachfolge meines geschätzten Kollegen Marco Wanderwitz für die Bereiche Bauen, Wohnen, Stadtentwicklung, Heimatpolitik, politische Bildung und das Ehrenamt in unserem Bundesministerium des Inneren für Bau und Heimat übernehmen dürfen. Kurz darauf hat uns ein Virus in Europa, ja auf der ganzen Welt, vor neue und nie dagewesene Herausforderungen gestellt. Diese können wir, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, nur gemeinsam als eine starke Europäische Union überwinden. Vor diesem Hintergrund hat Deutschland am 1. Juli den Vorsitz im Rat der Europäischen Union für das zweite Halbjahr 2020 übernommen. Covid-19 wird die deutschen und die europäischen Städte in besonderem Maße verändern. Den bevorstehenden ökonomischen und gesellschaftlichen Herausforderungen werden wir uns mit aller Entschiedenheit stellen. Die Stärken der europäischen Städte als einzigartige Orte sozialer, kultureller und wirtschaftlicher Vielfalt, Integration und Innovation bilden dafür eine gute Grundlage. Die aktuelle Situation stellt die Städte natürlich gleichzeitig vor die Frage, welche Schritte wichtig sind, um insgesamt nachhaltiger, lebenswerter und vor allen Dingen zukunftsfähiger zu werden. Dafür benötigen unsere Städte starke nationale und europäische Politiken, Strategien und Instrumente, die alle Bürgerinnen und Bürger in Europa mitnehmen. Mit der neuen Leipzig-Charta werden wir am 30. November 2020 auf einem informellen Ministertreffen für Stadtentwicklung in Leipzig ein solches zentrales strategisches Rahmenwerk für integrierte, resiliente und nachhaltige Stadtentwicklung in Europa verabschieden. Damit, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, knüpfen wir ganz bewusst an das Jahr 2007 an. Schon damals gab es ein solches Treffen unter deutscher EU-Ratspräsidentschaft. Mit der Leipzig-Charta haben wir damals ein wichtiges strategisches Grundsatzdokument als Zukunftsvision der nachhaltigen europäischen Stadt formuliert. Ich denke, wir können selbstbewusst sagen, dass die Leipzig-Charta damals maßgebliche Impulse für integriertes Denken und Handeln in der Stadtentwicklung auf allen relevanten Ebenen gesetzt hat. Und ich denke auch, dass viele Ziele und Prinzipien der Leipzig-Charta weiterhin gültig und relevant sind. Allerdings haben sich seitdem viele Rahmenbedingungen verändert. Der Klimawandel ist eine deutlich realere Gefahr geworden. Die Wirtschaftsmärkte haben sich verändert. Die voranschreitende Digitalisierung oder die soziale Spaltung haben an gesellschaftlicher Bedeutung gewonnen. Besonders in Städten wird dies deutlich. Mit Blick auf diese Veränderungen möchten wir während der deutschen Ratspräsidentschaft die Leipzig-Charta gemeinsam mit den europäischen Stakeholders neu denken. In einem breit angelegten nationalen und europäischen Dialogprozess haben viele Akteure aus Praxis, Verwaltung, Politik und Wissenschaft daran mitgewirkt, die neue Leipzig-Charta zu einem umfassenden europäischen Gemeinschaftswerk zu machen. Darauf bin ich sehr, sehr stolz und ich möchte an dieser Stelle bei allen, die daran beteiligt waren, herzlich danken. Im Kern geht es bei der neuen Leipzig-Charta um die transformative Kraft der Städte bei der Bewältigung aktueller und zukünftiger Herausforderungen. Zentral ist für uns die Wahrung des Gemeinwohls in den europäischen Städten. Wir beziehen die europäische Stadt auf 3 Dimensionen. Die grüne Stadt, die gerechte Stadt und die produktive Stadt. Damit nehmen wir Bezug auf die 3 Säulen der Nachhaltigkeit. Der Megatrend der Digitalisierung stellt ein Querschnittsthema in allen 3 Bereichen dar. Mit der Gemeinwohlorientierung zielen wir auf eine integrative sowie inklusive Stadtgesellschaft. Sie soll allen sozialen Gruppen, insbesondere den Benachteiligten, die gesellschaftliche Teilhabe ermöglichen und damit Quartiere nachhaltig stärken. Die Städte müssen im Interesse aller Teile der Gesellschaft handeln und natürlich auch dafür ausgestattet sein. Die aktuelle Pandemie verdeutlicht noch einmal mehr die Bedeutung des Gemeinwohls und die Schaffung robuster, krisenfester städtischer Gesellschaften. 3 Punkte möchte ich dabei besonders hervorheben, die in den vergangenen Monaten an Relevanz gewonnen haben. Die Krisenfestigkeit der Städte ist in besonderem Maße abhängig von stabilen und nachhaltigen Infrastrukturen, die die Versorgung mit wichtigen Gütern sicherstellen, die die soziale Teilhabe und Verwirklichungschancen aller Bürgerinnen und Bürger ermöglichen und die insgesamt zur Lebensqualität in den Städten beitragen. Eng verknüpft war und ist die Lebensqualität in Städten mit grünen und blauen Infrastrukturen. In den Monaten des Lockdowns wurde uns vor Augen geführt, welchen Stellenwert Parks, Wälder, Seen und andere Infrastrukturen in urbanen Räumen haben. Darüber hinaus sind sie wichtige Orte für ein gesundes Mikroklima und für die Anpassung an den Klimawandel. Last but not least erleben wir in unserem Alltag, wie sehr digitale Lösungen uns dabei unterstützen können, die vielen Ziele der städtischen Transformation umzusetzen. Sie können uns dabei helfen, innovative Dienstleistungen, smarte urbane Mobilität, nachhaltiges Wohnen, Nahversorgung oder, wie wir im Fall dieser Konferenz feststellen, die europäische Zusammenarbeit zu stärken. Gleichzeitig dürfen die Risiken der Digitalisierung und die Frage nach sozialer Teilhabe in diesem Kontext nicht vernachlässigt werden. Bei all diesen Aufgaben und Herausforderungen sollen die Städte nicht allein gelassen werden. Nationale und europäische Fördermittel sowie rechtliche und instrumentuelle Rahmenbedingungen sind wichtige Werkzeuge, um sie dabei zu unterstützen. Städte müssen in die Lage versetzt werden, sofern sie es nicht schon lange sind, integrative und innovative Ansätze anwenden zu können. Sie brauchen dafür auch Raum für experimentelle Ansätze. Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, die Konferenz soll Ihnen heute und in den nächsten 2 Tagen die Gelegenheit geben, solche innovativen und experimentellen Beispiele aus ganz Europa zur Umsetzung der Ziele der neuen Leipzig-Charta kennenzulernen. Wenn sie eines zeigen, dann, dass wir gemeinsam mehr erreichen können, um unsere Städte fit für die Zukunft zu machen. Dabei wünsche ich Ihnen in den nächsten Tagen viel Erfolg und viel Freude bei der Arbeit. Recht vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. Auf Wiedersehen.
Ja, ganz herzlichen Dank an den to the Parliamentary State Secretary. We just made a few arrangements in German. Sorry that I started in German. Thanks to the patience of the speakers that were planned immediately after the break, Claudia Baranzelli, Margit Noll, and Wolfgang Teubner. Thanks again a lot for your patience, and thanks to the organizers for allowing us to extend a little bit the duration of this conference. We were able to include this now, and also we have thanks to the team, I call them Hauke and Heike again, to fix the sound quality with Professor Geppert. We have now the chance we have now the opportunity for you, Ms. Geppert, for you to finalize your thoughts, your flow of thoughts and ideas and contribution, so that we can listen to it. Thank you. So, Ms. Geppert, the floor is yours to finalize your speech that you had in the beginning.
Hello? Do you hear me? Okay, thank you. Well,
Hi.
for giving me this opportunity of finishing my speech, I am jumping directly to the core, to the issue of the scales. The new Leipzig Charter makes a huge step forward, upward, I should say. The old charter of 2007 essentially confined itself to deprived neighborhoods, with a call for an active and strategic land policy and land use planning. The new Leipzig Charter makes a shift from urban regeneration policies in the neighborhood to the broad scale of urban, eventually even regional planning. So from now on, the city will be approached in all its scales: the neighborhood, the municipality, the functional urban area, where people live and work. By doing so, the new Leipzig Charter fills a gap. It establishes a link that was missing between the European scale of the ESDP, the territorial agenda, and the micro scale of the neighborhood. Between local and global, then, the cities have the capacity to carry out policies on the ground that respond to challenges identified by international organizations. In particular, I am thinking of the urban agendas of the EU and of the UN. Let us take an example. We speak about preserving biodiversity. To do that, indeed, we must restrain the use of a number of products in agriculture. And this is sector policy, which can be decided at the level of the EU, which has a competence in environment. But we also need green and blue infrastructure, where the fauna and the flora finds its habitat. And this is spatial planning. Another example, the energy transition. Yes, we have to improve the energy efficiency of the building sector, but we also need to reduce urban sprawl, spatial. By the way, you won't like it, but we would also have to reduce severely the use of internet sector policy, because internet is becoming the first consumer of energy in the world. So in fact, my point is that sector policy will not be sufficient unless they are complemented by those policies that local and regional authorities draw up through spatial planning. And cities will be increasingly called upon to take action in this through the multi-level governance. We must ensure that we respect subsidiarity. Local authorities should be active. They should not become mere implementers of policies designed at the global level. Last point, I would like to point out a matter that does not feature sufficiently, in my opinion, in the draft charter, and this is small and medium-sized cities. Cities are not equal. They don't have the same situation. They don't have the same problems. Small and medium-sized cities, most of the time, have been forgotten by globalization. So there is a need of a very proactive policy to help them to get back in good, virtuous economic and other development. In 2015, the Latvian presidency came forward with a Riga declaration, which was aiming at this. Since then, very little has happened. And it would indeed be a pity if this new Leipzig Charter, which is supposed to help us for the next 20 years, would miss the opportunity to address this very issue very clearly. I would say all the more so as today, small and medium-sized cities have a major role to play. I would like to share a little experience from France during the Corona lockdown. We had 48 hours when the confinement was announced to choose where we would stay for the next, we don't know how much time, right? In those 48 hours, 1 million people, inhabitants, fled from Paris to the provinces. That's 10% of the city. And I must say that the first numbers that we have about the real estate crisis, to be confirmed, they show that the province is going up, while Paris is at best stagnating, eventually slightly going down. This is all open questions because we are today and not in a few months when we'll know everything much better, right? So, to sum up my stand, my opinion, I say yes. I say yes to the common good. I say yes to the shift to good urban planning. And I say yes to the articulation of scales. Those are good things. I say no, and I would love to talk about it in another conference. I say no to digital transformation. It has too many risks, and the charter is absolutely not sufficient when it's only talked about privacy. And I say, I ask for more. I ask for more small and medium-sized cities and for more attention to subsidiarity. Thank you for your attention and looking forward, if possible, to the discussions perhaps at noon.
Thank you very much, and we are very happy that we had the opportunity to listen to you. Thank you also a lot for the inspiring talk, also for the clear statements. That helps a lot to have a constructive and impactful discussion. Now we have planned to have some more scientific inputs, 3 in a row, that reflect on the city's future challenges and how to address those. We will start with Claudia Baranzelli. She's a part of the Joint Research Center Institute for Environment and Sustainability at the European Commission, investigating predominantly land use dynamics in European areas. That's what she does. She's an expert in modeling assessment tools applied to urban and regional context, GIS systems, and other spatial analytical tools. So I think this proves that she is scientifically fit and can really teach us a little bit. Thanks for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. Let me just share my screen and my presentation. I hope it's working. Voila. Can you all see it?
Yes, very well.
All right.
Maybe you can
Okay.
you can change. Well, perfect.
Here we go. So thank you again for inviting me here. I take this opportunity to thank you again to make us part of the process that is leading to the new Leipzig Charter. So I will try in the next minutes to very briefly summarize what has been the Joint Research Center from the European Commission scientific support to this process. And just to give a little bit of a context, this contribution has been developed in what we call the Knowledge Center for Territorial Policies, which is co-led. It's an initiative co-led by us, JRC, and the Director General responsible for regional policies, so DG Regio. And here is the place or virtual place where we produce evidence-based, we do scenario modeling. So we try to investigate what might happen in the future according to different scenarios, and where we find ways to disseminate all the knowledge that we produce. In this context, in particular, the role of the community of practice on cities has been, our community of practice has been crucial. Many of the contributors to the process of the new Leipzig Charter actually are members of the community of practice. And what we contributed with was actually the very first collaborative project that we carried out within our community, and that we call the Future of Cities. and that we finalized last year in 2019. So in the next slides, I will summarize or just give hints about the findings that we shared with you during the process, according to the three lenses: the just cities, the productive cities, and the green cities. So I'll start with the just city. In this context, we dedicated much time to the analysis of different challenges, which through discussions and confrontations with our partners came up as the most predominant. So social segregation, health disparities, aging, and affordable housing. All these have been already mentioned by Dr. Maak before, but I want to stress in particular two that are dear to our hearts and that we will keep working on in the next future. One is aging, and in particular how aging is intertwined with the issue of segregation within cities. And the second point, which has been already mentioned, is the role of buildings and basically the physical infrastructure in cities. Almost half of our buildings in Europe were built before 1950, and so we can easily understand that change often needs to happen in pre-existing urban fabric. This is a further hurdle or challenge that we have to take into account when thinking about transformation, be it digital or not. With this in mind, in the now and in the coming future, we're going to further develop a project which is called C-Town that is focused on affordable housing. We have a new project on migrants. We have more exploratory activities dedicated to homeless in cities, exploring also the role of unconventional data sources in this. So I'm very happy that mobile phone data, for instance, from Vodafone has been mentioned before, and also the issue of data sovereignty has been brought up to attention, because all these are challenges that as researchers we have to face when trying to study this kind of phenomena, trying to use also a little bit more cutting edge technologies and techniques. And then I want to mention our forthcoming contribution to an European Commission initiative on aging, which will be a green paper, and that where we will try to highlight the impact of aging process in cities regarding, for instance, access to services, health, loneliness, etc., in order to identify, or at least try to identify, challenges and opportunities. Coming to the second pillar, the productive city. Last year, we contributed with an analysis more focused on the role of technologies. Here in this slide, you see summarized some of the findings that we were discussing, for instance, related to the role of technology in changing our habits in the use of private cars or teleworking. In a nutshell, we, as challenges, we identified, of course, the issue of defining appropriate use of technology, the changing nature of work, and also of great importance, the role of innovation and creativity in all this process. All this we have done with a particular attention to how technology is used in different aspects of our life. So either in our daily life, for instance, when it comes to shopping, or how we work, or how we use public service. Also distinguishing between different types of cities. So whether we're looking at a rural village, a small, medium-sized town, or a large town. And this is an aspect that we will and that we are picking up now with the current work that we are carrying out. In fact, we want to, and we are producing what we call a brief, so a short communication entitled "Cities Fit for the Digital Age," where we will focus on these aspects that I just mentioned, and in close collaboration with DG Connect. We will also keep working on the role of mixed-use neighborhoods. You mentioned before the work that I do with my team on land uses, and this is indeed an important part of our research activities. And last but not least, we are now focusing more and more on analyzing the role of tourism, especially in the face of what has just happened and what's happening with COVID-19. So, and we like to look at this issue and this topic, calling it from shock to recovery. So trying to imagine how we could revitalize tourism, taking on board what's just happened and what's happening still now. Finally, the third pillar is the Green City. Here we contributed with analysis focused mainly on climate change, mobility, and the use of public and green spaces. Here you see some results, for instance, regarding the availability and accessibility to public green spaces, or for instance, the use of water resources. This type of analysis we will keep updating, but now we're focusing a little bit more on the urban-rural interface. And again, this is a discussion that has been brought up also during the meetings that we have been having during the process for the new Leipzig Charter. And the second relevant issue that we picked up from the discussion and that we are now developing further is the building stock renewal. And this is particularly important for us because the so-called renewal wave is a fundamental element of the Green Deal. So we will dedicate, and we are dedicating much time to that. So regarding this pillar of the Green City, we will come up with a short communication on urban-rural interaction and on circular economy in a nutshell. So just to complete and to conclude, sorry, my presentation. I want to stress that all these activities and all these examples of outcomes that we already shared with you and that we will share in the future are not one-off initiatives, but they are enshrined in a consistent, let's say, framework that we call Urban Observatory. And the Urban Observatory is basically the section of our knowledge center that is dedicated and focused on urban issues and cities. And of course, this type of analysis and results will be shared in different ways. For instance, through systematic publication of briefs or short communications, as I mentioned before. We are consolidating the Urban Data Platform Plus, which is the way we share the actual data that are behind all the analysis that we have and that we are carrying out. And then we also encourage and foster dedicated activities dealing more directly with cities or local authorities in general, to establish dedicated pilot and investigate, for instance, issues like the scaling up of urban solutions, in particular for what concerns the technological, let's say, technological issues. So this just to say that, again, to reiterate that I'm very happy to be part of this process, that what we have done so far, it's not just it, but I hope it will continue and it will evolve, as the challenges also for us researchers are actually still ahead of us. And yeah, so I encourage you to join us in the community of practice on cities if you haven't done yet so, and to explore the Knowledge Center for Territorial Policies, so to maybe gather also some inspirations about further issues that we could explore together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baranzelli. These short input statements are planned as a series of 3 10-minute input statements. So besides this high-end contribution, I thank you also a lot for really sticking to the time frame. For those who logged on and were not logged in before, we are running about 20 minutes late, and we will also add this to the total duration of the conference. So now we are welcoming already the next guest and speaker for the short inputs: cities, future challenges, and how we address them and how they can be addressed. This while Ms. Baranzelli had her roots in Italy, we are now moving to Austria, I guess. We welcome Dr. Margit Noll. Dr. Margit Noll is the chair of the management board of the Joint Programming Initiative, JPI. For those who don't know, it's a transnational research and innovation program that focuses on sustainable urban development. Her main tasks relate to the joint implementation of the strategic research and innovation agenda. And without further ado, I would like to give you the virtual floor, Ms. Noll. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure being here, and still good morning. I think it's still okay to say that to everyone online. It's a pleasure being here and contributing to the presentation of the Leipzig Charter and this promotion series that you have set up. And it was also a pleasure to cooperating in the process of updating the Leipzig Charter over the last year, basically. I will focus a bit on the link between the Leipzig Charter and research and innovation on behalf of our program JPI Urban Europe, and try to create indicate some links and potentials also when it comes to the implementation. Starting with, I would like to emphasize the importance of an integrated policy implementation, and it was already mentioned in many of the previous contributions, but to be able to address the complexity of urban challenges, we need to really foster integrated approaches and go beyond the different sectors and silos. And I would like to underline that by using the SDGs and the indication of how the urban dimension cross-cuts the SDGs and how important this urban dimension is to achieve these sustainability goals on a global, on a European level. And that, of course, brings some consequences along, because that means that while these individual policies that address the poverty or the energy transition or climate action and others are addressing urban aspects as well, they are interrelated to a very, very wide extent. And that results in the fact that these relationships need to be really considered also on the policy level in order to avoid that possible conflict, hinder and prevent really the achievement of those policies. We need to understand these interrelationships and the complexity of the urban dimension in these various policy areas in the different sectors. You might call them silos. In order to understand where we need to put in the policy focus. And we thought that this importance of these interrelationships requires more attention also on the side of research and innovation, and that's why we dedicated our program to those aspects. We call that dilemmas, these potential conflicts that we need to pay attention to. At the other hand, there might be synergies across these different policies and strategies that we need to exploit well in order to really be effective in our action. And so what we did we dedicated our research and innovation strategy to those dilemmas and identified some of them. And with that, I would like to really foster and highlight the importance when we talk about the Leipzig Charter and the just, green and productive cities that Claudia also mentioned in its specific aspects. I would like to put emphasis on the end. It's about achieving all of them rather at the same time, right? And not in each of them, not be attached to each other. So I think the most interesting and difficult thing will be to set up policies and actions that allow to work on the just, green and productive cities. And with the approach that we have started, I think we are ready to take up this discussion and look into the relationships between different strategies and needs. For example, when we talk about the climate action and how we get prepared for disruptive events and how we respond to them in a way that not only allows to tackle those, but ensures livability for the people. And looking at the COVID situation, we all experienced over the last month how difficult it is and what the public effort to combat the pandemic, how that resulted in restrictions for each of us. Right? So how can we deal with situations that allow us to tackle these issues without reducing the quality of life and livability? How do we deal with the scarcity of land, with all the limitation and all the different interests that we have for green spaces, for accessibility, for affordability? How do we deal with public spaces that should be available for everyone, that balances different kinds of ownerships, different kinds of needs, security concerns, densification needs? So a lot of these issues were mentioned before, and I think also research and innovation needs to tackle that in order for policymakers to act accordingly. And that brings me to the how we could do that. And we are fostering in our program a very experimental approach. So we believe now we need to bring together all the different stakeholders and I guess all the urban doers know what I'm talking about. We are fostering a lot in our funding and in the project that we are supporting urban living labs, as they allow us to not only have the research, support research and in kind of the ivory tower, but really brings it into the local context, into the real settings. And the concept of urban living labs is a very promising one that shows a lot of success stories already, as it is a form of governmental experimental governance that allows all the stakeholders to co-design solutions, approaches in the real life setting, in the communities, in the neighborhoods, building upon an actual need, an actual issue, and then connecting science, policy, society, and business in order to find an appropriate way to deal with that. And these forms of experimentation are at the moment used in different kinds of projects. They show that this is working, but we now need to take the step into the daily business. So how can city administration, how can authorities really build upon these new experimental forms in a much stronger way, that these are not only projects on their own in an isolated setting, but that they contribute to a new kind of governance and urban development. And along the ambition of the Leipzig Charter, we are convinced that these approaches help to build capacities in public administration and society, that they help and focus on neighborhood level and then maybe scale it across mainstream solutions, and that they support a transformation also on the governance on various levels. So this is a promising approach, we believe. And according to this, we see a very strong potential to connect the policy level and research and innovation with regard to implementing the Leipzig Charter. I think this you show with this event that you're connecting, and that the Leipzig Charter is open to receive input and team up with other initiatives. And I think when it comes to the implementation of the Leipzig Charter over the next years, there is quite a potential to bring policy making and research and innovation much stronger together, and really on a strategic level to identify what are the policy needs that define the priorities for research and innovation. How can policy create new forms of governance, new kinds of co-design, open up regulatory frameworks maybe to be more flexible, more experimental, and use research and innovation as something that brings new approaches, that helps to build capacities, creates new evidence, and by that we can design a new approach to really bring these two areas much better together. And in that way, I'm very much looking forward to the next phase. So when the Leipzig Charter comes into life, when we talk about the implementation, and we hope that we can build strategic allies and links that allow us together to create the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Noll. It gives me also a great opportunity to announce that on the 18th, when there's this web conference about setting the right framework, Ms. Lotta Moser will talk. We will dedicate also a lot of attention to the connection between the urban agenda and the new Leipzig Charter. So we will come back to this as well. Let's move on to our third input statement. Everybody who was already active in the times when the Rio Declaration was put into place, Rio 92. I personally remember that I absorbed ICLEI as one of the first worldwide networks of cities that acknowledged the importance of local authorities. Well, we have now with us the regional director of the European Secretariat of ICLEI. So ICLEI is still alive and kicking. That's very good. Has now accumulated about 1,750 municipalities and cities. Let's say local and regional governments. And Mr. Teubner, we are happy to have you, and the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Palenberg. Thanks also, of course, for inviting me to this very interesting event, even though we are, of course, not exchanging personally today, but virtually. So I do not have a presentation, and I would try to maybe, just take a slightly different perspective, but also allude maybe a bit to things that have been said in the course of the event so far. So as a sustainability network, of course, our perspective is coined by focusing on the basics, I would say, of the protection of, the earth and the fundament of human life. So I would say, based on that, I would say we see three key transformative challenges that we are currently facing, and of course that are also faced by particularly cities and local governments. The first one is decarbonization. So, based on the Paris Agreement, and also, of course, now enshrined in the goals of the European Union, we have to be carbon neutral by 2050. So that leaves us with, now roughly 30 years to achieve that, which is a massive transformation. The second one is, of course, also the protection and restoration of our natural resources. We have a massive overconsumption of resources, particularly, of course, in the industrialized countries, and Europe is certainly here also, quite ahead, sort of, with consumption, ecological footprint of about 3 planets, I would say. And the third one is, of course, that was already mentioned, digitalization, which is not necessarily so much driven always by human needs, but it's driven by capital and innovation. And we will have to, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the perspective, have to deal with that. And it's also, of course, providing opportunities. Based on these transformative challenges, I would like to say, we have to look into 3 dimensions of transformation. And the first one is, of course, the technological transformation. So the technological transformation is of course, driven by innovation, by opportunities, but it's also needed in order to achieve those goals. And we have to decarbonize our energy systems in the first place. We have to come to 100% renewable energy over the next 30 years. We will have to massively change our transport and mobility systems. And this is going far beyond, just changing the fuels. So I think that Mr. Maak already elaborated on that. We need not the same number of cars, be they electric, be they being on hydrogen or biofuels. This does not necessarily help. And even if they are autonomous, it doesn't help. But we need also to reduce the number of cars and come to different mobility culture overall. And then, of course, on the other hand side, we also have to deal and potentially improve still the digital infrastructure in order to tackle some of these problems. This leads, of course, to enormous need of investment and funds that are needed in order to finance this transformation. This brings me again to the socio-economic challenge. I mean, in the first place, of course, we are oriented again, and now also with the recovery package, to growth, but we have not yet found a way to overcome the situation that growth always leads to additional consumption of resources. And even though we become more efficient, the rebound effects are usually, almost outweighing the progress that we are making in efficiency. So I think we have to fundamentally, in that sense, question the model of growth, and to, which is also, of course, intrinsically linked to the way our financial and monetary systems are built and working. And I think that is a challenge that comes in that sphere. Secondly, of course, the developments that are driven by digitalization. I mean, even though there was a positive picture, of course, painted, it's a big divider. I mean, already the idea that we are all working in home office, I mean, this is true for people working in administration, in service, partly, and of course in management. But people who work in production are not necessarily in home office. Secondly, the economic challenges, all this online shopping and everything that's ongoing, which is, of course, having all these impacts on the urban infrastructure that were, quite well described. On the other hand side, I mean, there are people packing the parcels that we get. There are people who deliver the parcels that we get, who are in precarious employments, who have, low income, low qualification, while, of course, the upper middle class and middle class sits at home and consumes. So I think that there are big divides in this, and we have not found a way to find good compensation. And secondly, the transformation is also leading to change of qualification, but also potentially with Industry 4.0 to a need for less workers. And we see already the dramatic impacts. I mean, only the switch from fossil fuel driven cars to electric cars, not even talking about reducing the cars, going to sharing models or servitizing, is having dramatic impacts on the car industry and the employees, and is not necessarily received that well. So we have not a good social compensation model to manage the transformation. So in that area, so that's all alluding, of course, to the transformationals. And thirdly, of course, we are still driven by competition. So cities are even competing against each other for investments. So of course, this is often impacting on standards, on land use protection and so on. Because of course, if you want to attract investment, you are able, you want to, of course, often subsidize by providing cheap land. And of course, last but not least, I would question, for example, the idea of basically saying the city is not maybe the future, and we all are more or less, living in a more polycentric world. Because I mean, if we look at small towns and villages, the model is, whatever, single family homes, whatever. Either you destroy, in principle, the culture and the character of these by basically densifying them, or it's sprawling. And secondly, of course, also this has, even though, we are all sitting at home and working digital, I do not think that people are not moving, to centers where there is culture and everything. So I think this has impacts also on further infrastructure, and that is also impacting on land use. So I think this is, this has to be kept in balance. And last but not least is, of course, to manage a socio-cultural transformation, because we see already with COVID and the change in our work lives, but also currently the rundown of cultural life, of these things that the inability basically to spend our leisure time in the way we were used to, that there are, in all of these transformations, there are massive transformations of our lifestyle, which we call sort of the everyday culture, that we have to monitor, which is mentally and psychologically a challenge. And we see also, of course, protests upcoming. We see, division even of the society, more aggression, more confrontation about these issues, which we have to carefully manage in order to keep our communities and our societal cohesion. So, and this is going further with, the way we produce our food, the way we consume, what we consume, and how local this can get, how sustainable this can get, all these issues, and even changing from the ownership of a car to car sharing to driving less. These are all cultural efforts that are basically deeply entrenched in our everyday culture that we have to address, which means co-create with people, involve people, and we are challenged to keep our communities and societies together. So I leave it at that at the moment. I think my time is over, and maybe we have time to address some of these issues in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teubner. We have of course incoming questions. That's clear. There were 3 very interesting and diverse statements and inputs. We promise to try to gather them and be responsive, because these 3 input statements were not planned as a long discussion phase where we have the opportunity to address all the questions that are coming in. The reason for this is basically the balance between how long people survive online conferences and because we don't have these coffee breaks, we don't have, it's just different, and so everything is a little bit more compact. But we hope that we can answer interesting and relevant questions. For example, also Niklas Maak has already sends everybody his best wishes and is also ready to answer your questions. So please, if you have questions to him, you can address us also, and we can forward this to Mr. Maak. This was with his last greetings before he needed to leave. Well, the last phase of this kickoff conference is a talk, is a conversation which has some leading questions, and we are happy to also have Anna Geppert staying with us a little bit. Ms. Geppert, I acknowledge if you need to leave, if you need to, please just give us a little sign. Otherwise, we're happy that you could stay. I would like to introduce the two people that are my conversation partners here. They were really deeply involved in the elaboration, in the dialogue process, in the development of the new Leipzig Charter. One is Tilman Buchholz. He's deputy head Urban Development Policy in the Federal Ministry of the Interior, Building and Community. And in this function, he is a very relevant German representative of German policy on EU level. He's a member of the Urban Development Group, and he is very, very deeply rooted in the whole development process. And the other person is Professor Dr. Silke Weidner. She's professor at the Brandenburg University of Technology, Cottbus-Senftenberg. Where is she? Please just show yourself. That would be great. Ms. Weidner is mainly interested in sustainable and integrated urban development and published also topical aspects such as the effect of e-commerce in urban areas. So she's very down to the point, and she is also deeply involved in the preparation of the new Leipzig Charter in cooperation with the German Association for Housing, Urban and Spatial Development and the Urban Knowledge Network. Well, thanks for being with us. I have enough material to talk with you for hours. Dear Mr. Buchholz, dear Ms. Geppert, and dear Professor Weidner. But first, maybe to Tilman Buchholz, a very personal question. You were already in the development process of Leipzig Charter 1, let's say 2007. How does it feel to be so closely involved in a process that is now also under the German presidency?
Yeah, thank you very much. Really a pleasure to be here in this conference, and yeah, to make some remarks. Indeed, I started my career in urban development with the Leipzig Charter 2007. I was not so closely involved in the development process at that time, but I joined when the Leipzig Charter was nearly finished. But I know a lot about the whole process, and it's enthusiastic, of course, for me to follow the whole time from 2007 until now. In 2007, we really focused on integrated urban development with the Leipzig Charter 2007, I think for the first time on this European scale. And also in all the years after 2007, we pushed the ideas of the Leipzig Charter as much as possible in Europe. Of course, also in Germany, because the Leipzig Charter 2007 was the reason for us to kick off, to launch this initiative in Germany, National Urban Development Policy, an initiative that aims to implement these principles of the Leipzig Charter 2007. We decided quite early to dedicate the German Council Presidency in 2020 again to integrated urban development and to renew the Leipzig Charter.
How would you, from the perspective of the ministry, how would you describe why this renewal is such an important focal point for the ministry?
Yeah, for the ministry, as I have pointed out, on the national level, it was a very crucial document because in the end it was a rationale for us to start this national urban development policy in Germany, which was an innovation at that time also in Germany. And in the meantime, a lot of national urban development policies evolved also in other member states, and also heavily inspired by the Leipzig Charter, which is fantastic to see, of course. Integrated urban development always was at the heart of the urban policy in Germany. So it was, from our point of view, quite obvious to focus again on this issue under the German Council Presidency this year.
If we think about the dialogue process a little bit, for those who are not so familiar with the fact how such a policy develops, how would you describe it compactly? I'm sure you could probably tell us long stories about the dialogue process, about the ups and downs, but please just tell us how did it work? Who joined on national and who joined on European level? And then we move on to Ms. Weidner and talk a little bit about the structure of the policy.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, the idea to agree on a new Leipzig Charter and to focus on this document again was born already 3 years ago in 2017 when we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Leipzig Charter of 2007. At that time we took stock and we had very concise evaluations of integrated urban development policies on the national level as well as on the European scale. And the result of all this evaluation was that the main principles of the Leipzig Charter are still absolutely relevant, but there are enough reasons, as we have heard before in all these presentations, to renew this kind of document. So we started this dialogue process on the national level as well as a dialogue process on the European scale. On national level, we had the Länder, we have the local authorities, representatives of the local authorities, we have the planning associations, architects, scientists. So the whole landscape of stakeholders we have in urban development in Germany, and it's a really rich landscape. And on the European scale, it was similar. We had the member states, we had the Commission, we had the European institutions and organizations, scientists as well, and also those stakeholders that you have seen before, JRC, ICLEI, JPI, Urban Europe, all important actors in this game that made also very, very valuable input into this dialogue. It was inspiring. It was very rich debate, sometimes controversial, of course. It's not easy to really agree on a document of that size and ambition between so many stakeholders. So it was not an easy task, but we learned a lot, and for us, especially this kind of ping pong game between the national level and the European level, that was very, very interesting for us. For example, I could say this focus on the common good. I think it came mainly from the national level, and then we transferred this idea to the European level, and we had extended discussions on the common good. Especially also on the wording. That was not easy at all, because we had different versions and different ideas that are behind that concept of the common good.
Well, thank you very much. We will come back to this topic of the common good for sure in a few minutes. We have now thank you for your first statement, Tilman Buchholz. We will get back to you also with the focus on the comparison between these two charters. Let's now focus a little bit on two aspects. First, the genesis of the new Leipzig charters, of the structure, and then about the urban policy of the common good that you already just mentioned, and about and all the aspects of participation and co-creation. I would like to address a few questions to Professor Weidner and Professor Anna Geppert. You are very welcome to after this to comment on that from your point of view. Ms. Weidner, the development of the structure, you were deeply involved in it, not to say that you were kind of the designer of it. How was this developed? And Tilman Buchholz also already mentioned a little bit controversies. Where were the tensions, and how did this develop?
Yeah, the structure and the content of the present charter, or the draft of the charter we now have, were significantly shaped by two things. Firstly, the findings out of a so-called baseline study, and secondly, from the results of the discussions in the dialogue rounds. And this step by step, as Tilman already mentioned it. And you can imagine that like this. First of all, we identified from scientific studies, political documents, and so on, the urgent challenges facing European cities. We heard some of them this morning as well.
Just a little second, while you are talking, I just noted down that Jonas Scholze can share with us the structure. For those who are listening,
I will give him.
Would be great.
I would. Okay. Maybe it's a little bit too early, but okay.
I'm sorry. Okay, it's gone, or it's gone. So you tell us when to show it. Thank you. I'm sorry.
That was the plan, but no problem. So yes, because when I'm talking about how to develop the structure, we don't need the figure, but later on when I go into this, it would be very helpful. I'm with you. What I just tried to explain was that we put a lot of information, of scientific information, of political information, of other talks together in a baseline study. And concerning the urgent challenges facing European cities, their potentials and their necessities. And out of this, you can imagine that very complex overview with a huge number of topics. We formed clusters of topics. And maybe Tilman, do you remember our somehow funny pictures in our first working session where we visually worked with shipping containers, and we filled them with topics like climate and mobility and demographic change and much more. And then we stacked them, we placed them next to each other, on the top of each other, repacked them. And even if it sounds now a little bit funny, it was hard work to get all these topics together and to find their where they are woven together and so on. And with that parts of the baseline study in our bag, we first entered into the national dialogue with the German experts. Then adapted and developed everything, what they told us, what we discussed, and entered then into the European dialogue. So it was step by step, one after each other, and the whole thing 5 times, as we already heard from Tilman. And so the document initially became more and more extensive, of course, detailed and comprehensive. And as Anna said before, Anna Geppert, I would like to read more about this. More was really a challenge because everybody wants more about his special topic and something else. So you can imagine hard work to bring all together, to decide what is most relevant and what is maybe too much detailed for this document. And if you like me to talk about the controversial discussion as well, a little bit?
Yes, I mean, I must really say, I think that especially in Europe, controversies are also a producer of different solutions. So this whole notion of not being debatable or controversial is something that is sometimes also not seen as it's very constructive to have controversies, and usually it often leads to the fact that there's a plan B for a plan A that doesn't work. So yes, please, it would be great, and please make your statement there, and then I would like to invite Professor Geppert also to comment on this.
Yes. I'm with you, but let me really first emphasize we had very good and fruitful discussions. Even if there were controversial discussion elements, it was very fruitful in all phases. But of course, there were and are topics or even structural proposals in the Charter that do not fit everyone equally well. Of course, that's different, and I think that's normal in such a complex environment, because the member states already have very different framework conditions in general and in urban development and urban development planning as well. And of course, the stakeholders also look very closely at their interests, sometimes really, let's say, isolated or sectoral. And we had to reconcile this. So that was about the controversial discussion. And now if Jonas would be so kind to open the slide with the figure of the Charter, I can give some examples. Thank you, Jonas, very much. For example, if we have a look on that's in the middle of the chart, on our 3 dimensions of the city. We heard about them this morning as well. We have just, green, productive, and we have this cross-sectoral dimension of digitalization. And there was a long and repeated discussion about whether our 3 dimensions or 3 cities were the right ones, both in terms and of content. So the question of where and to what extent we should place digitization, for example, was also neither quick nor easy to answer. Niklas Maak pointed a lot of these topics out as well. What is the conflict? And we now have the digitization as a cross-sectional field in the Charter, even if it could have been also a dimension of its own, for example. And in this sense, there is no right or wrong here, in my opinion. It's all about weightings, sequences, emphasis, combinations, priority setting, what else. That is maybe one point of controversial discussion. And we have always tried to keep in mind that the Charter has to be readable, what means somehow short and understandable framework setting and strategic document. And there must be room for everyone to act under this umbrella in a way that makes sense and is adapted to the respective own situation. So that is the idea, to give containers, maybe again, and the member states and all the stakeholders, the actors can fill them or can pick something out of it.
Thank you. Before we move on to discussing a little bit deeper this paradigm of the common good and it's also its translation challenges between German and English there. Professor Geppert, would you like to comment on this structure? Would you like to see the structure one more time to comment on it, or it doesn't?
Hello, do you hear?
Yes, we hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, good. So, indeed, when you're on the working field and you're making a draft, you do have to work with all the different positions and to find your way through it. I mean, this is politics. And what I'm doing is the view of the scientist whose independence of speech has been established in order to give to the politicians and to the people on the ground a view which is a little bit one step backwards or upwards. So, I mean, of course, when you read the Charter, in the structure of the charter, you can very well see those two big lines, for instance, which are on the one hand, let's say, speak about those that we have been speaking about today, digitalization and let's say spatial approaches. So from my position as academic, as representative of the university, I must challenge you a little bit, not on the feasibility of your position, but on the content, on the statement that there would be no good, no wrong or right here. What is my argument? You know, we have two pillars here. I mean, we have 5 in this document, but those 2 approaches, the 3 + 1. And in the end, if I look at the very simple question of who benefits, I will not have the same answer. And the pandemic of the coronavirus has shown it very, very strongly. If you take 5 minutes to look at the shares of Google, Alphabet is his name on the stockyard. It has, of course, had a short down, but it is now at a historical high. If you look at the French mixture of CAC 40, the 40 leading businesses, they tell a completely different story. So they tell the story of a shift which has been accelerated from the real, let's say, economy to the virtual economy. And it is not the same people who benefit. A little bit like my colleague was telling in the person just before me in his speech, right? So if we say that we are accommodating both, in the end, what is happening is that somehow we are putting them on the same field. Perhaps are we even hoping that the benefits from the digital sphere will somehow a little bit be redistributed, be compensating the other ones. But you know, the people from the real economy, the people, the normal people, all the other ones, which are numerous, they don't want to be compensated. They want to make a decent living out of their work. And this is going to get us into a number of troubles which are already having. In France, the yellow jackets, yeah, right? In Spain, Podemos, and so on and so forth. Because people do not want, even if it were the case, to be compensated. They want to work and they want to have to make their living decently through their work. Another element of this shift, which we have seen with COVID, just one thing, I don't hear you, but I see you.
Okay.
How, for instance, in France, the suicide rate during the lockdown and the whole virtual life has gone high by 50%. And before you suicide, you have psycho problems of all sorts. Violence has gone up in the household. So, I mean, we cannot just say that those two, we can see that they have been there because you have countries, lobbies, pressure, everything. But we cannot see that there is no wrong and right. We can see that, yes, this is what happens. But I, as academic, it is my task to make statements which have right and wrong.
Thank you very much for those also critical words. I think it's just very welcome in the whole development process. And I would like to continue with this focus on the urban policy of the common good and the participation and co-creation aspect. Professor Weidner, what was the main driver, also reflecting a little bit the last 5 to 10 minutes, what was the main driver of these 2 new priorities?
Before I will answer this, I think I have to react on the comment of Anna.
Very welcome. This is called a discussion. I'm very happy about it.
Because it was addressed to me as well as scientific person. And that was our task, of course, in these discussions, when we talked about whatever, the green city, the productive city, it was our task to figure out the literature on these topics, on these points, as arguments for the decision of the politics then. Because at the end, it's a political document, And we tried to give for these decisions, what is in, what is out, in which scale, we tried to give the arguments out of the literature, out of the scientific background. So of course you're right, and that's what we have to do in these consortium. Okay, coming back to your question, the urban policy for the common good and the participation and co-creation. Jonas, could you please again show us this slide while I answer why we took these new priorities, or the document took these new priorities? To make it short, because these things seem central to the future development of our cities, and I think we heard that really a lot in this morning as well, and because the prevailing framework conditions make it necessary. And if we compare it to the first Leipzig Charter from 2007, these topics they're not included, and they could not be reflected before in this Charter because it was another situation. So the figure shows as well, and I will show you the left column pillar, where the 5 key principles of good urban governance are shown. So we have 5 key principles. One is this common good, which you asked for, and 2 of them are completely new. Others are already known and introduced on that level. So the 2 new ones is the first, the urban policy for the common good, and the second, pretty new, is the third one, the participation and co-creation. And to go a little bit more deeply in this, we just have to take a look around our cities, whether before or with Corona. I think it's not so different if we are on this abstract scale. First of all, and that's shown in this figure as well, the local levels. Cities have to deal with the situations, and they deal with the situations, as we heard before this morning. Cities act on behalf of the common good. Urban policy and urban development should be per se oriented towards the common good. But it seems somehow, or it has somehow, let's say, been pushed into background in recent years, perhaps because of the constant idea of the unlimited growth, what we heard this morning as well. So it seems to be very important to come back to this basic principle, the urban policy addressed to the common good. Another point which is different before I come to this participation is, and Anna said this as well, the city is not only longer an isolated city, it has a lot of functional interdependencies, and they are becoming more and more intensive. And for this, the functional areas have been added. That's in the right pillar, where we have the 3 spatial levels of the city, starting with the neighborhood. Of course, it's the smallest entity, the local authority, and then, and that it's new, the functional area. And coming back to this common good, maybe it's mostly interesting. It's central to the new Leipzig Charter. It's central for our cities, for the peaceful, the safe, and the attractive coexistence of our cities and the people, the inhabitants of the cities. And that sounds somehow logical and uncritical, but I'm still very pleased and yet a little bit surprised that we succeeded in focusing the Charter so strongly on this common good. It was not clear from the very beginning. So I think that's a good signal for the cities, as I said, it in or within or after things like pandemics. So the cities, and this is added to that, the cities have to be resilient and resistant, maybe adaptable, and provide a basis for everyone in every situation. And this is it is also where the idea of the common good, which we address here, comes from, and how it comes into this charter, as we already said. And what both of you mentioned, Dorothea and Tilman as well, sometimes it was really difficult to find the right terms for the desired content. And the common good is a good example for that for these somehow fuzzy terms. Here we discussed and translated back and forth for a long time how to bring the German term Gemeinwohl that is very familiar for us Germans into the right context and how to set it in such a way that the content is still correct. Step by step, we found a consensus by using paraphrases and examples, and I don't know, it was even hard between German and English. I don't know what Anna maybe give us for the French translation and other languages. That was not easy, and it was one example. There are different examples to have the same in mind and find the word in each language for it.
Well, thank you very much. It would, of course, be a good opportunity to really elaborate on this in a more in a discussion style, but I think and so I would like to give the last questions back to Tilman Buchholz. But thank you very much for your statement and also for opening a little bit the door that people who are new to this topic, who want to know more, can really envision a little bit the creation process and what was at stake. And so it led, for example, to a raise in the participation rate in the final phase of the conference, which I think is a compliment to all of you. So thank you very much. The last questions go to Tilman Buchholz for a short wrap up before we close the conference. Mr. Buchholz, please make clear the Leipzig Charter of 2007. Was this more a little bit of a literary text, or how would you describe it in comparison to this more dynamic document now, or did I misunderstand it?
Yeah, I have some doubts if I would call the Leipzig Charter of 2007 a literary text. For sure, the style is different. The style is very different compared to the Leipzig Charter of 2020. And probably nowadays you wouldn't draft a text like we did it in 2007. And hopefully the new Leipzig Charter is easier to read because now it really has a very clear structure, and I think this visualization that Silke just showed is, I think, a good demonstrates this main structure of the whole document. I think we managed to produce a document that is relatively easy to read, although we address so many challenges, and especially in comparison to the Leipzig Charter of 2007. I mean, that Leipzig Charter was quite easy to communicate, I always say, because it had only two main messages. One is to follow integrated urban development approaches and concepts in the cities, and the other one was to pay special attention to deprived urban neighborhoods. So that was quite easy, I would say, and perhaps in 2007 it was also simple to, or more simple than it would be nowadays, to really concentrate on two or one issues only. For the discussions we had in the run-up of this current presidency, I think it would have been impossible to have such a narrow focus. And by the way, when I mention here deprived neighborhood, this is a wording that we would have liked to see again in the Leipzig Charter, the new Leipzig Charter, but that was also an interesting discussion. It was not possible to have it there again because it's perhaps a little bit stigmatizing or something like that. Now we use the term, I think, neighborhoods with a multitude complex socio-economic challenges. So it's perhaps a little bit strange, but that was a compromise. Huh? Just to give you an example of the style of the discussions we had.
Thank you. Before we close, if you would have 2 sentences to describe the unique selling point now, how would you sell this new Leipzig Charter? And after these 2 statements, we will give the floor to the closing statements for Christian Huttenloher.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I think, the common good, focus on the common good. I think that is really something that is new compared to all other documents, recent documents that we have on our tables, global documents, European documents. So I think that is really a unique selling point of the new Leipzig Charter. And the other one is that we also very much focus on implementation, on empowerment of cities. So we have a whole chapter dealing with this empowerment. What do cities need to cope with all these challenges on the national level, on the European level? And I think this is another aspect that is really unique and that really delivers towards our intention to translate all these global and European agreements to the local level, because that is really the objectives that we have with the new Leipzig Charter to be adopted end of November this year.
Thank you very, very much, Tilman Buchholz. Thank you also very much, Professor Weidner and Professor Geppert for staying with us. Well, Alpha and Omega, we started with the president and we will finalize with the Secretary General of the German Association for Housing, Urban and Spatial Developments. So, Christian Huttenloher, the floor is yours for the closing words, and maybe we can expect a little outlook to what's to come in the upcoming web conferences. Thank you.
Yes, Dorothea, thank you very much. I will be now really brief for the closing remarks. We are already a little bit out of time, but thank you for being all, or mostly all, with us, even that we had a little longer discussions. Thanks to all the speakers and the audience for the interaction, also with your questions and comments in Slido or in YouTube. This really shows us that there is a huge interest and also huge commitment. And I think we have seen in this conference, even if we are not sitting together and seeing each other, that there is a strong European community sharing the same concerns to transform our cities. And with the new Leipzig Charter to be adopted end of November, we have a sustainable and strong and suitable strategic and political basis. I think we have heard a lot of visions and perspectives this morning for sustainable urban development, giving us also concrete ideas on how to put the objectives, guidelines and principles of the Leipzig Charter into practice on the ground. We surely couldn't discuss all the issues and questions into deep. There were, for example, a lot also popping up on the issue how to combine energy transition, climate mitigation with the digitalization. This is an issue we also tackle in the Leipzig Charter. But there I will come to the outlook that there will be on 2 days other sessions of this web series. So on the practical aspect of the new Leipzig Charter, so what are cities already doing to work on just, green and productive cities? We will have just in 1 week on the 9th of September 3 sessions, each dealing with one of these aspects. We have a lot of very interesting examples from cities and towns from all sizes, also from urban areas. And the final political session on the 18th of September will then ask how we can empower cities by multi-level governance and cooperation, and especially also by European policies, by European funding. So this is an outlook what is going on. So I hope that we have all of you, and perhaps even some more, and new guests in the next series, in the next sessions of the series. And I finally also would mention that this series can be watched on YouTube. So all the people who want to rewatch on some of the discussions can do this. You can also spread it to colleagues if you want to tell them to look into this conference series. And last but not least, I would like especially to thank Dorothea for guiding us through the sessions, despite we had some little technical difficulties. But with her enthusiasm and her positive attitude, I think she really made this conference very, very good. And I think this also represents the main message of the new Leipzig Charter. Even if our 21st century's challenges for environment, the global climate issues, the social cohesion and economy are huge. We have huge challenges, but we all are dedicated to tackle them by working together on a sound, resilient and sustainable urban development. So thank you very much and see you again in the next sessions.